Hey guys, Dan here with today's quarantine video. It is this week's TV news and reviews. We've got 6 new shows to do for you this week. Last week, I actually stopped at 3 shows because I was like, I don't know how many new shows we're going to get during the shutdown, so I'm going to pace myself. But God bless Netflix, they are just releasing shows as if the world was just fine. So we actually have 4 new shows from Netflix to talk about today. And that's not even all of the ones that are up that they've put up in the last few days. So we'll have more Netflix shows for you next week. But we have the Tiger King miniseries that everybody's talking about, as well as 3 other shows on there. And then we've got a show on Freeform called Motherland, and the much talked about as well Hulu show Little Fires Everywhere, starring Reese Witherspoon and Kerry Washington. So we're going to talk about all that. A few news items to take care of. You know, obviously, everything's still shut down production-wise with the coronavirus. Hollywood is sort of under quarantine, maybe not officially, but it's ostensibly shut down. So all of that's happening. Talk show hosts have been doing a few monologues, like from their houses or from their reading rooms, or, you know, Stephen Colbert's case from the bathtub. But they are mostly going back to work this coming week with no live audience. So they're just going to have their studio, and I assume a guest or 2 will come out, and that will be that. But Jimmy Fallon's going back to work. The Daily Show, Samantha Bee is going back to work this week from her house. She's having the crew, go film her in her backyard, I guess, or whatever. That's what the promo seems to indicate. Seth Meyers has not indicated that he's going back to the airwaves, but he is still doing like monologues and stuff from his reading room. But Fallon's certainly going back. I think Colbert is going back, and Kimmel is going back as well. So the 3 big heavy hitters at 11:30 should be all new next week with shows just with no studio audience, which is weird. Like, I watched the Stephen Colbert bathtub monologue, and it was sort of weird because you're used to hearing, you know, the laughter of the audience, and there is none, but he still sort of stops for the same beats. So it was interesting, and it will be interesting to see how all of that goes off. So, they're sort of getting back to work as much as they normally can. But in the meantime, let's talk about what we always do up front, which is the renewals and cancellations. Netflix is the only one being really active here with this. All the networks have kind of been shut down anyway. Plus, they all have their upfronts in a few months. I guess the beginning of May they do that, so in about a month and a half they'll be doing that. Again, not in the traditional sense. We talked about this last week, but they'll be sort of doing it virtually. But that's when they release all their new show information for the fall. So we'll find out what gets renewed and canceled at that point to some of these shows that are on the bubble. But Netflix is not beholden to any sort of timeline, so they just do things whenever they want. They have renewed the very popular Love is Blind for 2 more seasons. We reviewed that here on the show a few weeks ago. It's an interesting experiment. I don't know if I'll ever end up finishing the first season of it or not. Maybe if I'm bored enough here during the shutdown, I will. I didn't hate the show. I think I gave it like a B. It's an interesting social experiment, but I don't know if I can last for a whole season with these people. And then The Circle is another one. Now, I have not watched The Circle, but that's one that's getting a lot of buzz as well, that first aired last year, and that has been renewed as well for 2 seasons. Both of those shows, 2-season renewals. Also, Hustle and Flow was renewed for 1 year. That's another competition show that Netflix has. Again, that debuted, I believe, before I started doing these reviews in the fall, so I've never seen it, but it's, you know, like a singing or rapping competition, I guess. And then they have canceled the show Messiah, joining a lot of the more recent shows to only get 1 season on the streamer. They canceled the show about the girl that was running track that aired first in December. That's done. They canceled AJ and the Queen, the RuPaul show, and now this one gets canceled as well. I was not a fan of this when I reviewed it back in January. I gave it a C-, so, you know, good riddance, no love lost there. But Netflix being very, very, dropping the axe if these shows aren't really hitting the way that they want them to. So a lot of one-season wonders coming out of Netflix lately. So moving on to some other things in the TV landscape due to the coronavirus, and I'm not going to really comment too much on this stuff, just kind of throwing it out there. But New Amsterdam had an episode originally called Pandemic that was going to be aired in either this week or next week. I think it was going to schedule to air next week. And they changed the name of it since then anyway. But even still, they're not going to go with the pandemic episode, so they're going to have 2 repeat weeks and then air their what is now the season finale because they had to shut down production. So assumingly they will shelve the pandemic episode until next season. I mean, New Amsterdam isn't really that serialized. I mean, a little bit here and there with some of the goings on at the hospital, but not as much as a lot of other shows. Like Grey's Anatomy is very serialized for a doctor show. New Amsterdam, not entirely. So I don't think it will seem out of place next season at all. And plus, since they can, work around the episode and film and write new episodes by then, they can sort of frame it any way they want to, I guess, at that point. So let's see. Amazon is lifting its paywall for a lot of kids shows. So basically, you don't even have to have a Prime membership to watch a lot of PBS kids shows and Amazon original kids shows during the Corona shutdown. You just have to be an Amazon. You have to have an account. You don't even have to be a paying Prime member, so you can watch Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood and some of the other PBS stuff, and then some of the kid-specific stuff directly from Amazon. So I think that's cool. A lot of companies are doing stuff like that. Like AT&T is giving people, because they are owned by Warner, which owns HBO. So AT&T members, I guess, I switched over to Sprint, so I didn't really look too closely, unfortunately, at the article. But I guess they're going to be giving away a whole month of HBO and I think Stars. I think they're owned by the same people. Yeah. All through April for people that are stuck inside looking for something to watch, and as well, advertisers have been pulling a lot of spots, canceling contracts on TV networks left and right because they're like, well, our products are meaningless right now. The article didn't specifically say like who's pulling their ads, but you have to figure any movie studio is pulling their ads because movies are not coming out right now. Movies are not being released. This was the first week in box office history in over 100 years that there were no box office receipts. Now there are still like a couple hundred small theaters that are open across the country, and drive-ins are open as well, but studios are just not reporting numbers, because who cares? The last day that they reported numbers, I think it was March, I want to say like 19th or 20th, and literally the number one movie was Onward, and I think it made $38,000, so it's not a good day for big movies. So, even though there are a couple of theaters, a couple hundred theaters still open, including drive-ins, there's no box office total. So I imagine a lot of the people pulling their stuff off of TV is movie studios, because what are they going to hawk? They don't have a product right now. I imagine like car companies, probably. People are not rushing out to buy cars right now. So a lot of that stuff is being pulled. So through some sort of FCC loophole, basically, networks are allowed to charge nothing for ads if that's what they'd like to do. The only stipulation is they can't do that with politicians. Networks are required to sell politicians ads at the lowest possible ad rate, just because that's how it works. I forget when that went into effect. My broadcasting journalism class should probably help me here. Maybe in the 50s, I want to say. But obviously, if they're charging nothing for a lot of the ad revenue or a lot of the ad space on the channel, they're not going to charge politicians nothing. So there was that stipulation in there. But for the most part, they're just kind of giving away a lot of their ad space, sort of as a goodwill measure as well, for like, hey, once this coronavirus thing is over, don't forget we gave you all this ad time for free, so sign back up with us. And speaking of the ad revenue, the Olympics have been pulled, I'm sure you've seen this by now, to next year. So, which is weird. It's the first time I think ever that an Olympics has just been shelved for an entire year. But NBC is scheduled to lose about 1.2 billion with a B dollars in advertising because the Olympics is, one of the most watched shows any year that it's on. So obviously NBC is sort of scrambling to fill that ad time as well. But the upside to all of this is there are more eyeballs at home, more people not going out, more bored people. So pretty much across the board, through all day parts, all age groups, TV numbers for same day viewing are way up, with double-digit percentage increases. And some of these shows are seeing their best numbers all season. In some cases, in 2 years. The NBC Chicago shows are seeing their best numbers since 2015. Nightly news, specifically ABC and NBC, are seeing their best numbers since like the 9/11 era, the early 2000s. So that is some good news. I mean, maybe they're giving away their ad space to people for free right now, but the viewership is up, so a lot of these shows probably will get renewed. And we talked about this in the fall, too, because pilot season was put on hold. A lot of these shows that are on the bubble are probably going to get renewals anyway because, hey, everybody's already in place, da-da-da-da-da. So yeah, like Superstore saw a 50% increase this past week from the week before. And networks are kind of seeing that trend all over the place. Not with every show. Some shows are pretty much watched universally anyway. A lot of the CBS shows, everybody already watches them. But CBS had a week pretty much of repeats this past week, and even they were only down 15%. Usually if you air a repeat, it's like in the toilet at this point. Reruns are not really looked upon very well in the TV landscape these days. But yeah, even that is doing all right for them. So a lot of these shows are really, really getting a nice boost. Even something like, Last Man Standing on Fox, in its now, I think, 7th season, is seeing, its best numbers in about a year. The Good Doctor saw its best numbers the whole season. So pretty much across the board, all types of shows, all day parts, for all, age ranges are seeing increases. So that is very cool, I think. Especially, I try to follow how they do like the ratings now, because they don't really count certain things, like if you watch a show on Hulu, unless it's with their live TV component, they don't count it. So, like I watch a lot of my shows on Hulu. Especially because I'm usually, other than the pilot episodes or maybe the first 2 episodes that I watched for this review show, I'm like a year behind on my TV. So, I'm watching fresh off the boat episodes that aired a year ago. So obviously they wouldn't count that anyway. But even if I were to watch it the next day on Hulu, I don't believe that gets counted. It's only if it's like on demand through your cable provider or through Hulu's like live TV component, which is sort of like a DVR kind of thing. So it's counted for that. But anyway, live TV is getting a big boost viewership wise from that. So all right, well, that's really it. I mean, what else is there to talk about in the news other than the coronavirus lately? So let's move on. Let's get to the reviews. Like I said, I've got 6 shows for you this week, and we're going to kick it off with Little Fires Everywhere. This is a Hulu original. It is based on a immensely popular book by Celeste Ng and it's starring Reese Witherspoon and Kerry Washington. Joshua Jackson and Rosemarie DeWitt as well have supporting roles, and then a bunch of great child actors as well that are pretty much new, at least to me. So basically, this show takes Reese Witherspoon and her, just sort of very perfect looking from the outside. They live in like a McMansion sort of deal, and she's got 4 beautiful kids, and she's got this loving husband, Joshua Jackson, and this and that, and she wants to do good, and I think she believes she is a good person. I'm not sure yet if she is or not, but I think she plays it very interestingly, because clearly she thinks that she is a good person. And that's an interesting character to portray. Her name's Elena Richardson. She is a journalist, but also she I guess is renting this complex or whatever, and she rents it to Kerry Washington and her daughter, who is played by Lexi Underwood. I wonder if she's related to Blair Underwood. No, it doesn't say she is. Okay, because I love Blair Underwood. Who doesn't? But anyway, Reese actually sees them living in their car and sort of calls the police and says like, hey, like these guys are living in their car, get them out of our perfect neighborhood. And then it turns out, these are the people that are looking to rent this place from Elena. So it's sort of this class struggle business, and she ends up offering the Kerry Washington family, Mia Warren is her character's name. She ends up offering Mia a job in her house, sort of as like a maid. Her daughter is getting very close with Elena's kids, and there's some tension there. Elena's one daughter is 14 and just super rebellious and doesn't want to do anything that her mom says, and she burns her hair in the one scene, just to kind of prove a point. She's a real bad girl. Okay, so that all happens in the first episode. This is a mini-series, at least that's how it's touted. You know how these things go. If they're huge ratings, even if it's based on just one book, they might renew it, for another season anyway, and just go off the script from that. But it's listed as a limited series, and Hulu did something kind of unique with this in terms of rolling them out. They took sort of a Apple TV Plus approach to it. They put the first 3 episodes up, and then there's going to be new episodes airing weekly after that, every Wednesday, I guess. So there's going to be 8 episodes for this in total, and we see in the very, very opening scene that the house is being burned to the ground, this mansion. And I call it a mansion. It's not like a sprawling, like, Oprah estate, but it's, certainly anything higher than I will ever be able to afford in my lifetime. So it's definitely got a sort of a look to it that is of a higher quality, a regal look, as it were. So right away we know, okay, something's going on. The fireman tells Elena in the opening scene, like, well, I don't know what's going on, but this was clearly arson. Somebody lit your house on fire purposely with you in it. And then, okay, so then we flash back to what all happens in the previous 6 months. So, I assume we won't get to the fire part until maybe the end of the series. I don't know, or maybe halfway through. But I think this is a very interesting series. I was really invested in it. I wouldn't say that the characters are completely, original, or there's nothing necessarily unique about them. They're all sort of soap opera-ish people. Like this reminded me actually a lot of like Desperate Housewives, with that like the perfect looking family, but then it's got all these secrets and stuff. So it sort of reminded me of that a little bit. But the one thing this has above any other show is like top-notch A-list acting. I mean, Reese Witherspoon, she's been one of my favorite actresses really since Legally Blonde, for like 20 years. Maybe even before that, since Pleasantville probably. Kerry Washington, I enjoyed Scandal a lot. I did have to give up on it the last like year and a half. It was getting so silly. But she really held that show together, even in the more silly moments. But what really did it for me on Kerry Washington was Django Unchained. I mean, she was so great in that movie. The two of them together, it's just like this powerhouse of acting. And all the kids are really good, specifically her daughter and the one son of Elena's that really connects with Mia's daughter is also really good. His name on the show is Moody. It's his nickname. But yeah, I mean, the acting here is just far and above what you would see on normal television. And it's sort of funny. Like, I didn't watch a lot of Big Little Lies. I watched the first 2 episodes back when they first aired. Reese's character reminds me a lot of the character she played in Big Little Lies. I'm sure that's not an accident. Because her morning show counterpart is completely different. Southern girl. I mean, they're all sort of no nonsense characters, but there's a type here. It's this type A. Think Christina Applegate's character in Bad Moms. For sort of off the wall example, but this sort of ball busting female. But at the same time, her life around her is sort of crumbling. And like Reese is so, or Elaine, I should say, is so, by the book that she can't even have sex with her husband unless it's the appropriate night, on the calendar. So it's that kind of thing. She's very, very, fastidious, and she really genuinely believes that she is a good person. I think she's a little bit racist. I think she's a little bit over the top. I think she's a little bit much, but she doesn't think so. She thinks she has a good heart, and maybe she does, maybe she doesn't. It's very interesting. I really, really enjoyed this show. I cannot wait to watch the rest of these episodes. It might be a little too soapy. It might be a little bit, unoriginal, I guess, with the characters, but the acting puts it over the top, and just so far the interchanges, it's very sharply written. It actually does make me want to read the book to see if it's got that same sort of I don't know, that wit and that honest sort of conversation that comes across in the show. But yeah, I enjoyed Little Fires Everywhere. I'm going to leave it with an A-. So up next, I got to talk about this show, Tiger King. Everybody's talking about it. Murder, Mayhem, and Madness is the subtitle to this. This is a documentary series on Netflix. There's 7 episodes, and in true Netflix fashion, you can watch all of them in a row if you'd like to. All 7 hours of the Tiger King. I mean, this show is out of control. It's in the true crime genre, but in the first episode, there isn't really any crimes committed yet. So, I feel like they're kind of milking this a little bit. I'm not sure when the true crime element comes up, but you do see a scene of the lead guy here, Joe Exotic, is his, nom de plume here, but he is in jail. We don't really know why. We know he sort of maybe hired somebody or prompted his tiger to kill someone, but it's hard to tell because they're not giving us a lot of clues yet from that first episode. But essentially, there is this guy, Joe Exotic, that runs a big cat zoo, specifically tigers, but there's other big cats there too, down in Florida. And this dude, or maybe it's in Oklahoma, I'm sorry, his main rival is in Florida, but it's this guy who is gay and a meth addict, and he practices polygamy, and he's sort of a mess, but he's a likable mess, so you don't really know what to make of him. And then there's this woman, who owns a big cat rescue that, they're their main rivals, and they're always going after each other, and so there's all this drama there, and it takes place in the 90s, and basically, in that first episode, you just sort of learn what the two characters' philosophies are, and what their stance on the big cats are, and what their stance on, having these tigers and such as not really even pets necessarily, but, because they are in cages and stuff, they're not free roaming, but, you meet some of Joe Exotic's partners in the business, and some of them are his partners in life in the polygamy thing, and it's all a lot to take in. It's very much like a train wreck, you cannot look away because it's so like weird, and you just can't believe these people. And like the one kid they interview, who was actually a kid when he started with Joe Exotic, 15 years ago or whatever it was. I think he said he was with him from '03 to 2014, so I guess about 17 years ago. But he was fresh out of high school, and he looked like a normal kid, and then we flash forward to today where they're interviewing him, and he's like, his interview attire is just shirtless and a pair of jeans. His mouth is, full of empty holes where his teeth used to be, but he got addicted to meth, I guess. They don't really delve on that yet. But it's like, you could tell life beat him down, and so you're not quite sure, at least I wasn't, who the villain is yet, and who's the normal person, and are any of these people normal? We don't know. They get PETA a little bit involved in the first episode, and they don't really explain PETA's history. I guess they just expect you to know it, and I sort of know it, but I think PETA is like too extreme. So like, I'm an animal lover and I'm an animal activist, but like, I eat meat for sure, so I'm not PETA style, but like, I think they're way too extreme and aggressive in their like tactics. So it's like, for me, the viewer, okay, well, I already kind of have a negative opinion of PETA, but they don't really fill in those blanks for you. This show has a lot of problems. It really does. I think stretching this premise over 7 episodes is a little much. For something called a true crime miniseries, where is the crime? Tell me about the crime, at least a little bit in the first episode. But we're getting to know the characters, certainly. This Joe Exotic is a friggin' mess. He's exactly what you would think of when you think of, a gun-toting redneck, except that he's gay. You don't necessarily think of that as part of that, at least I don't, as a gay person. That's not usually the stereotype. So I think this definitely has value as a train wreck type of show, where you can't look away. But I think it's very padded to have this be a 7-episode miniseries, when they haven't even gotten to the true crime part, if it's a true crime show. So I can't grade it too high, but it is so interesting. I would have to recommend it to people. I mean, like, the people I know on my Facebook that are either watching it in pieces or have binged the whole thing in one sitting, all kind of say the same thing. Like, well, the whole thing is such a mess, and like, you can't even believe that this stuff is happening, that you can't look away. I think Love is Blind is sort of in that same vein, but in a different way. Like, Love is Blind, I think, makes you feel kind of, not dirty necessarily, but just like, it leaves a sour taste in your mouth after you watch it. You're like, this is compelling, and I kind of can't turn away from Love is Blind, but I don't feel good about watching this. I don't know. It's not that I didn't feel good about watching it. I just couldn't believe these people were real. Like, they just seem like, it's like every episode of Cops or something. Like, these people just don't seem real. But it's certainly interesting. I can't deny that. I just think 7 episodes is probably too much to stretch it, if they haven't even gotten to any of the juicy parts in the first hour. So I will leave Tiger King with a B, which is about the same grade I gave Love is Blind. But, for different reasons. They're both sort of train wrecks in their own way. This is certainly more watchable. Love is Blind, I think, is more interesting from a sociological perspective, but there's definitely some interesting sociology with this Joe Exotic dude, too. So, you know what? Actually, I can't give it the same grade as Love is Blind. I can't. I'll give Tiger King a B+. It's certainly more watchable than Love is Blind. But yeah, they need to move on the story here a little bit for sure. All right, so up next is Motherland, Fort Salem. This is on Freeform. I love Freeform. I talk about this all the time. I watch Grownish. I watch The Bold Type. I used to watch The Fosters while there, and I'm not the target demo at all for this channel, but I still really like it. And that sort of ends here with this show. This is basically like trying to be charmed, sort of. The premise is basically these three young adult women. I would say they're probably, not sure how old the characters are supposed to be, but the actresses are probably all in their early 20s. And I would imagine the characters are probably like fresh out of high school kind of thing. But basically, this is in sort of an alternate world where 300 years ago, everybody sort of was okay with witches, with some stipulations that they kind of, didn't necessarily, mingle with people, and they didn't cast spells on people. It's very unclear what the stipulations were for the witches remaining. They're clearly trying to build a whole world here, but it's not explained very well. Certainly not in the first episode. So it's hard for me to say exactly what's happening in this world. But anyway, these three witches are summoned to do like basic training in the quote unquote military, but basically it's for combat magic. It's called. So they get trained in that. Basically, the world is very female dominated. There's not a lot of men in it. We don't hardly see any men even in the show. Really, there's a few here and there, but clearly this is a woman-run United States. And these three girls are at the helm. Let me give you their names at least. You probably won't know any of them, but it's Taylor Hickson, Amalia Holm, and Jessica Sutton. And then the drill sergeant is played by Demetria McKinney. So these are all, up-and-coming actors. I don't know them. You probably don't know them. And they need to come up a little bit more. The acting in this is not that great. Now, I never watched really Charmed. I mean, I've seen parts of it. But Charmed started like when I was in college, and so we didn't watch a whole lot of TV, and it was before Netflix and everything. So, if you sat in your dorm room, you couldn't catch up on old shows that were, on or whatever. So I just never kind of caught up with Charmed. I'm sure I would like it, though, because I like all of the women in it, and I like the whole witch thing. I like that as a theme. Here it's a little bit off, though. I didn't hate this, but it's a bit corny. Freeform always has to inject gay people into the show, and like, look, I'm gay, so I'm not like hating on it, but it's just like every show doesn't have to have a lesbian kiss. Freeform, it really doesn't. Grownish has it, the Bold Type has it. Like we get it. There's gay people out there. Like, I don't know. It's weird to say that. Like I'm not trying to keep it down, but like, it's just enough already with it. Like, every show doesn't have to have, and specifically lesbians. There's hardly any gay men on Freeform. I guess maybe that's because their demo is more geared towards young women. I don't know. But so that's, a little old hat by this point. And then just, the effects aren't really that great. The world building doesn't make a ton of sense. However, I think the general premise is intriguing. I think there's some good things about this, like some of the action sequences are okay. I sort of like the concept of, us living in harmony with the witches and, making this pact 300 years ago or whatever at the Salem witch trials. So I find elements about this intriguing, but this is not something I want to continue watching and that I will continue watching. The acting needs to be a little bit better, and it's just kind of corny. Like, the scripts aren't that good, at least for the pilot episode. I should say script singular, because I only saw the one, but it didn't intrigue me enough about this world or these characters. I don't necessarily think any of the female characters are likable. Again, I don't know them yet, but they did not leave me wanting more, that's for sure. So we're gonna leave Motherland, Fort Salem with a C-. So up next, we're going to talk about Feel Good. This is new to Netflix as well. It's actually a show from England on, wasn't the BBC? Oh, it was on Channel 4, and it ran actually pretty much concurrently with Netflix. I don't know how they do it over there, whether it's going to be one episode a week or not. But on Netflix, of course, all 6 episodes are up to stream right now. And this is another one of these sort of, not coming of age, because these people are older. They're easily in their 30s, I would say. So not necessarily coming of age, but it's in the same vein of that, like, specific viewpoint from a specific person of a specific type. Like, we've been reviewing some of these towards the end of last year. Like, Shrill is from the perspective of a bigger boned person, a chubby person. Rami is from the perspective of a Muslim American. So here you have Feel Good, which is Mae Martin, is the lead actress, and she created it, and she co-writes it as well, and she plays a character called May, who is a stand-up comedian. So it's it's one of these where it's sort of art imitating life, a lot like Rami is. And we just actually reviewed one the other week on FX with Dave, which is the Little Dicky show. He's playing a rapper called Little Dicky. It's one of those. And so here the conceit is she's a lesbian, but B, she has this addiction to, she's gotten over it. She's been sober, but she has a drug addiction in her past. Cocaine, at least. We see that in the episode. Other than that, she doesn't really get into too many specifics, but she basically moves in with this gal that comes to her comedy shows. They start a life very quickly together before she even finds out that May has got this past. And so then it's a discussion of, okay, well now, how do we move on from this? You sort of lied to me a little bit, and then they go from there. Lisa Kudrow co-stars as May's mother. We haven't seen her in person yet. We've seen her over the computer because it takes place in the UK, but May's character is Canadian. I'm not sure if Mae Martin herself is Canadian or not. Let me look. Yes, she is. So she's actually won Canadian Comedy Awards. That's nice. So Lisa Kudrow plays her mother back in Canada. So we haven't met her face-to-face yet on the show, just over like Skype, basically. But she's the one who lets it slip to the girlfriend that May used to be in Narcotics Anonymous, or Narcoholics Anonymous, whatever it's called. So this is a show basically built with that conceit of, okay, it's a very personal show. I don't know if May in real life has these demons, of drug addiction over the years. I don't even really know if she's a lesbian, for that matter. But most of these shows, the star and the writer and the creator, if they're all the same person, it usually comes from a place of, this is personal to me. So I wouldn't be surprised. But I think it opens up a lot of interesting conversations about addiction, relationships, and it's got a very small cast, which I love. Like, there's only 3 permanent cast members. It's May, the girlfriend, and Lisa Kudrow. The girlfriend, by the way, I should at least acknowledge, is played by Charlotte Ritchie, who I'm not real familiar with, but she's been in things like Call the Midwife, so, BBC fans will probably know her. But I have not seen Call the Midwife. But they have this great chemistry together, and my only real complaint about this show, and by the way, I love shows like this. I do grade them fairly high as long as they're well written, because I think anybody that's bearing their soul in this personal way, I think deserves props. And, all of them are unique in their own way. Like Dave, I didn't grade that high because it's just so friggin' silly and, just very sitcom-y and sort of outlandish. Like, it didn't seem as personal to me as some of these other shows. This seems very personal to me. And my only real issue with it is that the Lisa Kudrow character, at least in the first episode, is just very, like, kooky. Like, not like Phoebe on Friends is kooky, but just, Lisa Kudrow has played this same sort of, like, harping mother-type character for about 15 years now in different movies and TV shows. So it's been done. So I would have preferred, I guess, somebody that I didn't know in that role. Maybe it was one of those things where hey, if you get us a star, we'll put the show on the air. So she found Lucy Kudrow. I mean, that's how Danny DeVito got on Always Sunny. They were about to get canceled after those first 6 episodes, and then FX said, "Find us a star, and we'll keep you on." And they found Danny DeVito. So it could have been something like that. I don't know, but I would have preferred somebody at least less famous, maybe, because it kind of takes you out of the realism of the show. And so I didn't love that part, but I'm on board for this show. I really do love these very personal stories, as long as they're well written, and they seem to usually be, and I think this is definitely one of the better ones out there. I leave Feel Good with an A minus. So let's see, there's 2 more to go, both on good old Netflix. Let's talk about The Letter for the King. This is listed as a series, so I would say it's not a mini-series. It will likely continue. Netflix does their top 10 shows of the day now. Every single day you can click on what the top 10 most watched shows of that day are. This was number 7 today, so I guess word of mouth is getting around about it, and usually that means Netflix will probably pick it up. So I don't think this is a limited run series, but it is only 6 episodes for this first season. So it is based on a book from, I guess, was it South Korea? No, it's a Dutch book from 1962, De Brief voor de Koning. I'm sure I said that real wrong. But this is basically another one of these Game of Thrones type of shows. We're getting sort of inundated with them these days. I've reviewed, I've only been doing this show since September, and I've reviewed at least 3 or 4 Game of Thrones wannabes. And it's just, first of all, it's not my favorite genre. It's one of my least favorite genres, actually. I like the Lord of the Rings stuff, but other than that, I don't really get into the medieval time thing so much. But that being said, I have reviewed some of them favorably. I liked The Witcher on Netflix. Carnival Row isn't quite the same in that vein, but I enjoyed that a lot on, I think, Amazon Prime. But a lot of them are terrible. That Jason Momoa one on Apple TV Plus is horrible. I think I picked that as the worst show of 2019. But here we have Tiuri, a teenage squire who is answering a call, sending him on a mission, basically, to deliver the secret letter to the king, and he has to go across 3 entire kingdoms to do it. And he is played by Amir Wilson. And he's actually a good little actor. I don't know him from anything, but he did an okay job here. My problem with it was a lot of the other stuff around it. The adult characters are not interesting at all. Anytime the kids aren't really on the screen, it's not very interesting. He is an interesting character as a kid, and like I said, he can act pretty decently. And some of the battle sequences are okay. I wouldn't say this looks as bad as the Jason Momoa show, but certainly you could tell that they're trying very hard to capture this Game of Thrones audience, and it just, for me, is not really working. Looks-wise, it has that same feel. And look, if you watch this show regularly, I don't watch Game of Thrones. I don't really have a lot of interest in Game of Thrones, but I've seen enough scenes to know that, okay, the production value is, major on this. HBO usually spares no expense when it comes to that kind of stuff, so it's no surprise. But, so looks-wise, it's got the look of a copycat Game of Thrones, and this kid, I from what little I know about Game of Thrones, it seems like a sort of, not a retread, because obviously this book that it's based on is from the 60s, so it was out, before George R.R. Martin's books, but obviously it's borrowing, I think, heavier from Game of Thrones than it probably is from this book. And I only say that because just knowing how Lord of the Rings is written and some of those things that involve medieval times that were written back in the 60s and 70s, I just feel like this is too close to I want to be Game of Thrones. It's not horrible. The kids, again, are doing a good job. They're doing their best. The adults, the acting's okay, but just the characters are just uninteresting. I didn't care about really anybody except this main kid and his quest, and even that I was like, either he makes it or he doesn't, I don't really care either way. So this, for all of the Game of Thrones ripoff, this is not one of the better ones. It's not the worst, but I can't leave it with too high a grade for this one either. So I leave The Letter for the King with a C minus. So we close with The English Game. This is on Netflix as well. This is a historical drama. It is a 6-part mini-series, so this will probably not be coming back for more. But this is a true story, supposedly, based on essentially the origins of sort of soccer as an official sport. It takes place in the 70s, I want to say, something like that. I think it says in the very opening, but I can't remember exactly. But I think it's about that time, like the 1870s. Does it say here? Oh, 1879. Hey, I got it right. And basically it is about the two classes. There's factory workers, and then there are the more rich people that own the factories and their ilk, playing against each other, and sort of how that all came about to form what we know, I guess, as soccer today, kind of thing. So I don't know how the rest of it plays out. I don't know if that's the main objective of it, but essentially that's how the first episode is. It's the working class against the elite, and the elite are basically not only the team, but everybody on the team is essentially on the board of the football committee or whatever. So there's some interesting things going on here. I liked the acting in this. Again, here's another show where I didn't recognize anybody. I mean, I'll read you some of these names. Maybe you know them. Edward Hallcroft, Kevin Guthrie, Charlotte Hope, Craig Packinson, Ben Batt. Not Ben Bratt. I know him. Let's look. This lead guy, Edward Hallcroft, because he was very good. All right, so he's been on some English shows like Wolf Hall and London Spy. I don't know those. But he was in the Kingsman, both the Kingsman movies. Okay. I don't really remember him in those, but all right. He is wearing a very 1800s mustache in this, so maybe he just looks completely different. I don't know, but yeah, he does a good job. I mean, the acting is pretty solid here. My biggest complaint with this show is it is very cliched about class struggle. There's nothing original here about English class struggle, factory workers versus the upper class. There's just it's saying absolutely nothing new. Now, if this is based on fact, then okay, sure, then maybe we get the cliches from the fact, but there's still an interesting way to tell it and to spin it a little bit and whatever. But at the same time, you also don't get to really know any of these characters. You know them more as a collective, and you sort of feel for their plight because of that. But you don't really, at least in the first episode, and there's only 6 episodes, so I can't imagine they delve too far into any of these people's lives if they haven't done any of that yet. The most we get is that the man that runs the factory that the workers football team is on, he's very sad that they want to do a pay cut for 5% because he's like, oh, my workers have families and they're barely scraping by as it is. I mean, that's like the most we get for who these people are, basically. So it's very cliched in that regard. But the acting is good. The scenery's okay. I just recently watched Emma with that rent to own pay to rent thing that Universal has been doing with their new theatrical movies, and that's like just gorgeous and like so lush. I get it. This is poor England, but even the scenes like in the nice places of the rich part of town, like it's still kind of like drab and like it's not, and I'm sure it's authentic to the time, but um, I feel like the rich part of town would look a little nicer, kind of thing. Um, but I liked this enough. I'm gonna leave this with a C plus. The English game, but yeah, I'm not sure if it's something I'll go back and finish, but I might. I mean, it's not. It didn't disinterest me. It just is very, very cliche, and I wish they let us in a little more about the characters. But that will do it. That is all of my Netflix shows. So one I purposely didn't do so we would have a biggie to talk about next week, and that is Self-Made, the four-part miniseries starring Octavia Spencer. And I think Tiffany Haddish is in it as well. And I might actually try and watch all 4 episodes of that because they're only like 45 minutes to an hour each. So I may actually try and watch that whole thing for you before I review that. But I wanted to have something big to hold back. And then there's like 3 other Netflix shows that are fairly new as well that either premiered in the last few days or are about to premiere tomorrow. Because they do a lot of their shows on Fridays. So most of these that I've talked about premiered last Friday. And then NBC has a new sitcom on. I forget what it's called. Something about single dads or dads with kids or something like that. So I'm going to review that, I suppose. And I'm not sure. It's like, a lot of the network shows are being sort of pushed around because they just they want to have things in the can in case we don't go back to work for 3 or 4 months. So there's not a lot of new network content, so a lot of it is going to come from the Netflixes and such. But we also have Quibi starting in a week or so. I guess about 2 weeks from now. It's April 6th is the launch date for that. And I finally found out it's called Quibi because I saw a commercial for it because it stands for Quick Bites. Quibi. I've been calling it Quibi because I don't know. Quibi. It looks like Quibi to me. But all right, Quibi, sure. So I may give that a spin too. With so little content out there, I may at least mention some of those shows on Quibi in a couple of weeks' time. So for now, that's going to do it. Tomorrow is a Friday episode. I don't know what I'm going to have for you Saturday. But new Connors next week, new Masked Singer. Sunday, I'll be continuing with my buddy Justin, counting down the 100 highest grossing movies of 2019. So we've got part 2 of that on Sunday. But yeah, I'm still going to be working every day to bring you a brand new video here on the channel. And I've reached 400 subscribers. So if you're one of them, thank you so much. If you're not, click on the subscribe button and let me know that you're out there. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. Comment below too. I love hearing from you guys. And we'll see you next time. Bye.